Nobody knew her name when they threw her off that train into the New Mexico desert. Left for dead, she lay in the dust until a stranger's shadow fell over her. Was he her savior, or something far worse? The year was 1883, and the desert stretched endless under a sky stabbed with stars. The wind howled, sharp as a knife, kicking up clouds of grit that stung the face like a warning. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped, its cry swallowed by the vastness. The steam train's whistle had long faded, but its rumble still echoed in the earth. Where Clara Hensley lay crumpled beside the tracks, her dress, once fine, was torn at the hem, smeared with dirt and blood. Her dark hair spilled loose, tangled, like the sagebrush around her. Bruises bloomed on her arms, and her breath came in shallow gasps. But her eyes green as river jade burned with something fiercer than pain, defiance. She clutched a silver locket in her trembling hand, its chain glinting faintly in the moonlight. Clara tried to move, but her body protested, heavy as stone. She didn't know how long she'd been there, minutes, hours, since those men had grabbed her from the train car, their hands rough, their voices cold. "You're done, lady," one had snarled before they hurled her into the night. The memory made her chest tighten, but she pushed it down. Not now, not here. She had to get up, had to keep moving. They'd come back for her. She knew it. A shadow fell across her, long and lean, blocking the stars. Clara froze, her heart hammering. She squinted up, eyes adjusting to the silhouette of a man on horseback, his hat tipped low. The horse snorted, pawing the ground, and the man's spurs jingled softly as he dismounted. His boots crunched in the dirt, deliberate, unhurried. Clara's fingers tightened around her locket, her only weapon a fleeting thought of throwing it at him. But she was too weak, and he was too close. "Who are you?" His voice was low, rough like gravel under a wagon wheel. He crouched beside her, close enough for her to see the lines etched deep in his face, the faint scar running along his jaw. He was maybe 35, with eyes that held the weight of too many hard years. His coat was worn, patched at the elbows, and a revolver hung heavy at his hip. Clara didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat was dry as the desert itself. The man studied her, his gaze sharp, but not cruel. He reached for a canteen slung across his saddle and held it out. "Drink," he said, not a request, but not a threat either. Clara hesitated, then took it, her hands shaking as she sipped the lukewarm water. It tasted like salvation. He watched her, his expression unreadable, then pulled off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. The wool smelled of leather and dust, warm from his body. "Name's Eli Tanner," he said, standing now, one hand resting on his horse's reins. "This ain't a place to be alone at night." "What happened to you?" Clara swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. "They threw me off the train." She didn't meet his eyes, her fingers tracing the locket's edges. Ellie's brow furrowed, but he didn't press. Instead, he glanced at the horizon, where the first hint of dawn was smudging the sky. "You can't stay here," he said, almost to himself. He rubbed the back of his neck, his jaw tight, like he was arguing with his own instincts. Clara caught the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the kind that came from trusting the wrong people before. She wanted to tell him she wasn't trouble, but the words stuck. She wasn't sure she believed them herself. Eli sighed, a sound heavy with resignation. "My ranch ain't far. You're coming with me." It wasn't a question, he offered, his hand calloused and steady, and Clara stared at it, her heart caught between fear and hope. She didn't know this man, didn't know if he was salvation or a new kind of danger. But the desert was cold, and the men who'd thrown her off that train were out there somewhere. She took his hand, her grip weak but resolute, and let him pull her to her feet. As they rode toward his ranch, Clara perched behind him on the horse, her arms loosely round his waist, the locket pressed against her chest. The desert stretched wide around them, silent. The New Mexico desert softened as dawn spilled over the horizon, painting the sky in ribbons of gold and crimson, like a promise of something better. Eli Tanner's ranch emerged from the haze, a weathered cabin nestled against rolling hills, dotted with sagebrush and twisted juniper. The corral's wooden posts sagged under years of sun and wind, and the lowing of cattle drifted like a lonesome song. Clara Hensley clung to Ellie's waist as his horse plodded forward, her body bruised and aching, her mind a tangle of fear and fleeting hope. His coat, still draped over her shoulders, smelled of leather and dust, its warmth a frail barrier against the world she'd been running from. She didn't know if she could trust this man, didn't know if his gruff kindness hid a trap, but the desert had left her no other path. Eli reined in his horse, its hooves kicking up red dirt that swirled in the morning light. He slid down first, then offered Clara a calloused hand, his touch firm but fleeting, as if he feared holding on too long. "This way," he said, his voice rough as the gravel underfoot. Clara's legs wobbled as she dismounted, her torn dress catching on the saddle. She clutched her silver locket, its chain glinting faintly, a tether to a past she wasn't ready to face. Eli led her to the cabin, its door creaking as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and old leather. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth cold. A scarred table, a single cot, and a shelf with a few tin cups spoke of a life pared down to necessities. Clara sank into a chair, the wood groaning under her weight, and felt the weight of her own silence. Eli knelt by the fireplace, striking a match with a practiced flick. Flames licked the kindling, casting shadows that danced across his weathered face. "You hurt?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder. His eyes, gray as a winter storm, held a flicker of concern beneath their hardness, like a man who'd learned to bury his heart deep. Clara shook her head, though her bruises throbbed and her ribs ached with every breath. "Just scratches," she said, her Boston accent sharp against the cabin's quiet. A stranger's voice in this wild place. Eli nodded, pulling a tin of salve and a clean cloth from a shelf. He set them on the table, keeping his distance, as if her presence was a fire he didn't dare get too close to. "Clean yourself up. I'll get food." Clara dabbed at her cuts, wincing as the salve stung, like a wasp's bite. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the fire's crackle and the clatter of a pot as Eli stirred beans on a small iron stove. He slid a bowl toward her, steam curling up, along with a wedge of cornbread, its edges golden and crisp. "Eat," he said, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, his revolver a quiet weight at his hip. Clara took a bite, the food grounding her, though her stomach churned with secrets. Eli watched her, his gaze steady but not cruel. "You gonna tell me why you were thrown off that train?" he asked, his tone blunt, like a man used to cutting through lies. Clara's hand froze, the spoon halfway to her mouth. Her green eyes met his, guarded as a locked gate. "It's not your trouble," she said softly, her voice barely carrying over the fire's snap. "Not yet." Ellie's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching beneath his scarred cheek. He opened, his mouth to press further, but a sharp sound cut through the morning calm hoof beats, heavy and fast, pounding closer. Ellie's hand snapped to the rifle above the door, his movements swift, his limp barely slowing him. "Stay put," he ordered, stepping onto the porch with the ease of a man who'd faced trouble before. Clara's heart thudded as she crept to a shutter, peering through a crack. 3 riders approached, their silhouettes stark against the rising sun. Their coats were dusted red, their hats pulled low, and their spurs glinted with menace. The leader, a weary man with a scar slashing across his cheek, raised a hand in a mockery of friendliness. His smile was all teeth, sharp and predatory. "Mornin', friend," he called, his voice smooth as snake oil but cold as a winter creek. "We're hunting a fugitive woman, about 28, dark hair, fancy accent. Seen her?" Eli stood tall, rifle cradled in his arms, his limp hidden by sheer will. "Ain't seen no one," he said, his voice hard as iron. "This is my land. Move on." The leader's eyes narrowed, raking over the cabin like a vulture sizing up. "A carcass, sure about that, rancher. She's worth a pretty penny dead or alive." His hand hovered near his holster, and the other 2 riders shifted, their horses snorting, ready for blood. Clara's breath caught in her throat. These weren't bounty hunters, not the kind bound by law. They were the tycoon's men sent to silence her for good. Her fingers tightened on her locket, her pulse racing. She edged toward the back door, her boots silent on the creaking floorboards, every instinct screaming to run. "Don't," Eli said, his voice low, meant only for Her. He hadn't turned, but he'd sensed her movement, his back still to the room. Clara froze, her heart torn between flight and the faint trust his words stirred. Outside, the leader chuckled, a sound that chilled her blood. We'll be round. Rancher, keep your eyes open. He fired a single shot into the air, the crack echoing off the hills like a whip. The riders wheeled their horses and galloped off, leaving a cloud of dust that hung like a thread in the morning light. Eli stepped back inside, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Who are they? He demanded, his eyes boring into hers. Clara sank onto the cot, her hands trembling, the locket warm against her palm. Men who want me dead, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Ellie's gaze searched hers, hunting for deception, but found only fear and something fiercer, like steel beneath silk. You bring trouble to my door. I need the truth, he said, his voice low but unyielding. Clara's fingers traced the locket's edges, her voice breaking. I didn't kill him. That's all. Thunder growled low over the New Mexico hills, the sky bruised purple and heavy with the promise of rain. Eli Tanner's ranch stood defiant against the gathering storm, its cabin walls groaning as the wind clawed at the shingles. Inside, Clara Hensley sat by the dying fire, her green eyes fixed on the silver locket in her hands, its surface worn smooth by years of worry. The weight of her secret pressed harder than the bruises on her skin. She'd told Eli enough to keep him from turning her out, but not enough to unburden her soul. Across the room, Eli cleaned his rifle with steady hands, his scarred jaw tight, his gray eyes flicking to the window every few seconds. The bounty hunter's warning hung between them like smoke, and the desert outside seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Clara broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. You didn't have to lie for me, Eli. Those men, they'll be back. He didn't look up, his cloth moving along the rifle barrel with deliberate care. Didn't lie for you, he said, his voice rough as the sand outside. Lied for me. Don't need trouble on my land. But his eyes betrayed him, catching hers for a moment too long, a flicker of something warmer than duty. Clara felt it to a pull she hadn't known since Boston, since before her life unraveled. She pushed it down, clutching her locket tighter. There was no room for that now, not with death riding toward them. The first raindrop hit the roof, heavy as a bullet, then another, until the storm unleashed its fury, hammering the cabin like 1,000 fists. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the hills, and Clara's heart sank. Hoofbeats, not the wind, not the storm, but the unmistakable thunder of horses closing fast. Eli was on his feet in an instant, rifle in hand, his limp barely slowing him as he moved to the door. Get to the back, he hissed, but Clara stood, her defiance flaring. I'm not hiding, she said, her voice sharp. This is my fight too. He didn't argue there wasn't time. Through the rain-streaked shutters, they saw them, the 3 riders from before, their coats slick with water, their faces grim under sodden hats. The scarred leader raised a pistol, his shout cutting through the storm. Tanner, send her out, or we burn this place to ash. Ellie's answer was a single shot, splintering the corral post beside the leader's horse. The animal reared, and the fight was on. Bullets tore through the night, punching holes in the cabin's walls. The sharp crack of gunfire blending with thunder. Eli fired back, his aim steady, dropping one rider with a shot to the shoulder. Clara crouched by the window, her hands shaking, but her resolve iron. She grabbed a poker from the fireplace, its iron tip glowing faintly, ready to swing if they got close. The leader charged the porch, his pistol blazing, and a bullet grazed Clara's arm, hot and searing. She stifled a cry, blood soaking her sleeve, but she held her ground, swinging the poker as the man kicked the door open. It caught his wrist, sending his gun clattering. Eli tackled him, the 2 men crashing to the floor in a tangle of fists and curses. Clara scrambled to help, but the second rider burst through the back door, his knife gleaming. She ducked his swing, her locket swinging wildly, and grabbed a chair, smashing it across his knees. He howled, stumbling, and Ellie's fist found the leader's jaw, knocking him cold. The storm roared louder, as if cheering the chaos, but Clara saw the 3rd rider circling outside, aiming through the window. Eli, she screamed, shoving him down as a bullet whizzed past, embedding in the wall. They moved as one, instinct binding them. Clara dragged Eli behind the table, her arm burning, her breath ragged. Rain poured through the shattered shutters, pooling on the floor, and lightning lit Ellie's face fierce, alive, his eyes locked on hers. Without thinking, he pulled her close, his hand cupping her face, and their lips met in a desperate, rain-soaked kiss, tasting of dust and fear and something neither could name. It lasted only a heartbeat before the fight pulled them back, but it changed everything. Eli kicked over the table for cover, reloading his rifle as the third rider fired again. Clara's eyes caught something in the leader's coat, spilled across the floor, a crumpled wanted poster. She snatched it, her hands trembling as she unfolded it in the flickering light. Not her face, but another's, Mary, her sister, younger by 2 years, her eyes wide with fear in the sketch. Clara's breath stopped, the truth spilled out before she could hold it back. "I didn't kill him," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My sister did." He tried to force her, and she fought back. "I took the blame to save her." Eli froze, his rifle still aimed at the window. The storm seemed to pause, the rain softening for a moment. "You've been running for her?" he asked, his voice raw. Clara nodded, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "She's all I have. They think I killed the tycoon, but it was Mary, in self-defense. I couldn't let them take her." The locket fell open in her hand, revealing Mary's face, a girl who looked like Clara but softer, more fragile. The third rider's shout broke the moment, his horse charging the cabin. Eli fired. The shot true, and the man slumped in the saddle, his horse bolting into the storm. Silence fell, heavy as the rain, broken only by Clara's ragged breathing and the drip of water through the roof. Eli helped her to her feet, his hand lingering on her arm, his eyes searching hers. "You should have told me," he said, not angry but weary, like a man who'd carried too many secrets himself. Clara met his gaze, her voice steady despite the pain. "Would you have believed me?" He didn't answer, but his silence said enough. The storm raged on, the desert swallowing the echoes of the fight. Clara's arm bled, but she stood taller, her secret laid bare. Eli slung his rifle over his shoulder, his face set with a new resolve. The cabin was battered, the night far from over, but something had shifted between them, a trust forged in gunfire and truth, fragile but real. The storm had faded, leaving the New Mexico desert shimmering under a merciless noon sun, its red dirt baking like embers. Eli Tanner's ranch stood scarred, its walls pocked with bullet holes, the corral splintered from the night's violence. Clara Hensley stood in the doorway, her arm wrapped in a makeshift bandage torn from Ellie's shirt, her green eyes blazing with a resolve that outshone her bruises. The crumpled wanted poster lay on the table, her sister Mary's face staring up, a haunting reminder of the truth Clara had carried across half a continent. She'd taken the blame for a murder Mary committed in self-defense, fleeing Boston to shield her sister from a tycoon's vengeful family. Eli leaned against the wall, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his scarred jaw tight with determination. The fight had bound them, a trust forged in blood and rain, but the shadow of danger still loomed. They needed to end this, and the answers waited in Redstone. Eli saddled to horses, their hooves kicking up dust that glittered in the sunlight. His movements were steady, though his limp tugged at each step, a ghost of an old wound he never spoke of. "We ride to town," he said, his voice rough as the desert wind. "Sheriff's gotta hear your story, Clara." She nodded, slipping her silver locket into her pocket, its weight a tether to Mary, to the promise she'd made to keep her safe. She mounted her horse, her arm throbbing but her spine straight, her torn dress a badge of survival. The ride to Redstone was quiet, the desert sprawling around them, its cacti standing like silent guards, their spines glinting. A hawk wheeled overhead, its cry sharp and lonely, and Clara stole a glance at Eli. His hat was low, his gray eyes scanning the horizon, but she caught the flicker of something softer when he looked her way. She wanted to speak, to name the warmth stirring in her chest, but the words stayed buried, held back by the weight of what lay ahead. Redstone buzzed with the pulse of the frontier wagons rattled over rutted streets. Merchants hawked wares, and saloons spilled raucous laughter. and the tinny notes of a piano. The sheriff's office stood at the town's edge, its faded sign creaking in the breeze. A stern sentinel amid the chaos. Clara's heart pounded as they dismounted, her dress drawing curious stares from townsfolk, their whispers trailing like dust. Ellie's hand brushed her elbow, a steadying touch that anchored her as she met his gaze, finding a quiet strength there, a promise he didn't need to voice. They stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of tobacco and old wood. The sheriff, a man with a drooping mustache and a badge pinned crooked, leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "Tanner," he grunted, sizing them up. "What trouble you dragging in now?" Clara stepped forward, her voice clear despite the blood staining her sleeve. "I'm Clara Hensley. The men after me, they're no bounty hunters. They're hired by a tycoon's family to silence me for a crime I didn't commit." She pulled a letter from her locket, its paper creased but unbroken, written in Mary's trembling hand. "This proves it. The man they say I killed, he attacked my sister. Mary, she fought back to save herself. I ran to protect her." The sheriff's brow furrowed as he read, his fingers drumming the desk, his eyes flicking to the window where two of the tycoon's men loitered across the street, their hands twitching near their holsters. "This is heavy, lady," he said, his voice low. "That family's got deep pockets. Money buys men like those." Ellie's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. "They shot up my ranch, sheriff. Tried to kill us both. You gonna let him walk?" The sheriff shifted, his gaze uneasy. "I took their coin once," he admitted, rubbing his neck. "But this letter, it's evidence. Changes everything." He stood, his badge catching the light, and stepped outside, calling the men over. The street fell quiet, townsfolk pausing, sensing trouble. The scarred leader sneered, his hand on his pistol. "You picking the wrong side." "Sheriff," he spat. The second man edged closer, his eyes locked on Clara. Words turned to steel in a heartbeat. The leader drew, but the sheriff was faster, his revolver barking, dropping the man in the dust, blood pooling under the sun. The second bolted, leaping onto a horse, but Eli was already moving, his rifle raised with a hunter's calm. A single shot rang out, and the man slumped, his horse galloping wild into the desert. The town held its breath, eyes wide, as the sheriff dragged the bodies to a wagon. "They'll face a judge back east," he said, returning, his face grim but resolute. "That letter's going with them. The tycoon's family won't wiggle out of this." Clara exhaled, relief flooding her, though dread lingered. "What about Mary?" she asked, her voice tight. The sheriff scratched his chin. "If she's hiding, she's safe for now." "Where is she?" Clara hesitated, then spoke, her eyes steady. "With the Comanche, north of here. They took her in when she had nowhere else." Ellie's head snapped up, a spark of respect in his gaze. The sheriff nodded. "Smart. Comanche don't take kindly to outsiders sniffing around. I'll send word your sister's free, long as that letter holds." Ellie's hand found Clara's shoulder, his touch warm, lingering. "We'll find her," he said, his voice soft but certain, a vow carved in the lines of his face. They rode north, the desert giving way to rocky hills where the Comanche camp nestled, its hide tents blending with the earth, adorned with woven blankets and beads that caught the fading light. Mary ran to Clara, her face tear-streaked, her dark hair braided tight, her eyes wide with relief. The sisters embraced, their sobs blending with the desert wind, their hands clasped tight. "I thought I'd lost you." The New Mexico desert bloomed under a rising sun, its golden light spilling over Eli Tanner's ranch like a whispered prayer, softening the harsh edges of a land that had tested them. The cabin stood weathered but proud, its bullet-scarred walls kissed by dawn's glow, a quiet monument to the storm they'd survived. Clara Hensley leaned against the porch rail, her sister Mary at her side, their hands clasped tight, fingers woven like the sagebrush roots that clung to the rolling hills. The silver locket hung at Clara's chest, its chain glinting softly, no longer a heavy secret, but a beacon of promises kept, a tether to the sister she'd crossed a continent to save. Her green eyes traced the horizon, where the desert stretched, wide, its red dirt and twisted juniper bathed in a warmth that felt like forgiveness. Eli worked in the corral, mending a sagging fence with calloused hands, his limp softened by the morning's peace. His gray eyes met Clara's, and a smile flickered across his scarred jaw, brief but deep. A silent vow forged in gunfire, trust, and the fragile moments they'd stolen amid the chaos. Mary laughed, her voice bright as a bell, as she tossed hay to the horses, her braided hair adorned with Comanche beads that caught the light like tiny stars. She'd chosen to stay, to build a life here with Clara, free from the tycoon's shadow that had chased them from Boston to this wild frontier. The Comanche had sheltered her when hope was a flicker, teaching her to weave blankets with intricate patterns, swirls of earth and sky, stories of survival etched in every thread. They showed her to read the desert's secrets, the tracks of deer in the dust, the arc of a hawk's flight against the dawn. In 1883, the Comanche were more than warriors. Their camps were vibrant hubs of trade, where hides, horses, and woven goods passed between tribes and settlers. Their resilience a quiet strength that stitched the Southwest together. Clara held that gratitude close, her heart swelling for the people who'd given Mary refuge, who'd taught her to stand tall in a world that tried to break her. Eli joined them, wiping sweat from his brow, his worn coat dusted with the red earth of the land he'd fought for. He handed Clara a canteen, their fingers brushing, a spark passing between them like a flame catching dry grass. They stood in silence, the air thick with unspoken vows, the desert breeze carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Their love was a slow fire, kindled by shared scars. Ellie's wife, taken by outlaws' bullets in a raid that left him hollow, and Clara's years running to shield Mary from a tycoon's vengeance. Clara's hand lingered on his, her touch a promise of tomorrows neither had dared to dream before. Together, they herded cattle across the rolling hills, their voices mingling with the herd's lowing, Mary's laughter weaving through like a melody. The desert, once a menacing expanse of dust and danger, now felt like a cradle, its vastness a canvas for their new beginning. They rode together toward the horizon, horses kicking up dust that shimmered in the golden light, Mary's smile bright beside them, her beads clinking softly. Ellie's hand rested on Clara's, his touch a vow without words, pledging to face the future together, to build something lasting on this hard-won land. In the 1880s, the Comanche wove strength into the frontier, their trade networks binding tribes and settlers, their camps alive with the clink of beads, the rhythm of hoof beats, and the stories told in woven patterns. Clara, Eli, and Mary carried that hope forward, their hearts bound to each other and this desert that had become home. What did you think of Clara and Ellie's journey? Would you have risked it all for love or family? Drop a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more epic Western tales.